It was way too short. I loved every book that I've read. I never read classics. I will buy the second book. Hi fellow readers, welcome back to this channel. My name is Marie and I am here today for a reading wrap up. So I had like 2 full TBR and I think I picked around 10 books for each TBRs. I am 2 books away from finishing the TBR, but I'm making this wrap up today because the last 2 books that I have on my full TBR are French books, so I will not be talking about them anyway. I also read some more books that were not on my full TBR but that I read prior to making the new full TBR. So without any further ado, let's start. I read The River Has Roots by Amal El Mohtar. This was my first book of November. I was expecting to like this, so it was not a surprise when I ended up loving it. This is my favorite book of November so far. I really loved the story, loved the writing. This follows the story of 2 sisters that really love each other dearly, but one day one of them is going to reject a forceful lover and she's going to, by doing so, she's going to put her family's life at risk and her own life at risk. It was such a beautiful story and it was way too short. I'm sorry for saying this, but it was just way too short. I wanted to keep reading this book so bad and I'm so sad that it's over. And it was so small. It was such a small book. So many emotions were hidden in that very small book. She did not disappoint, but I knew that she wouldn't, so it was not like a big surprise or anything. I loved this book and I recommend it if you also liked This Is How You Lose the Time War. Well, it's absolutely not the same style in terms of stories, but it is very similar in terms of writing, and it was just the most beautiful story so far, and I can't wait for her next books. Following the advice of my best friend, I read Lightfall, The Girl and the Guardian by Tim Probert. My best friend has been talking about this book for as long as I can remember. She's read it maybe 5-6 years ago, I don't know, but she has always told me that it was such a great book, and she's an artist, she draws a lot, and so I think this book really inspired her in finding her own style in art, I guess. So she was really eager for me to read this book, and I finally did, and I gotta tell you that this will not be the last time you hear about this book. So she was right, I loved it. The art was beautiful, it was such a beautiful little book, and the story was rather interesting. Bea, the girl, main character, has a very peaceful and quiet life, and all of that changes when she meets the last Galdurian, this little guy right here. They are going to go on an adventure together. It was such a nice little adventure, and it really made me forget that I was reading. I guess maybe it's the artwork, maybe it's the images, I don't know. But this book really made me forget that I was reading the book, you know. I kind of felt like I was inside the story, and that's such a great feeling when that happens in books. I think this is probably like my best reading wrap up so far because I loved every book that I've read and this one did not disappoint. So moral of the story, listen to your best friend when she recommends a book and she tells you that you're going to love it. More often than not, they're right. So that's your sign to pick up the book that your friend has gifted you or given you or recommended you. Then I read a classic, and that is Persuasion by Jane Austen. Reading classics really makes me feel like I'm widening my horizons, I guess, because I never read classics. That's a big flaw of mine. I tend to forget the classics, to leave them behind. Overall, I liked the characters, I liked the story, I liked the plot. I guess I was just reading it for the sake of reading it and not really because I was interested in it, I guess. It's not that I didn't like it, and I think I do want to read more of Jane Austen's work because at some point, you know, I have to face my fears and I have to read the goddamn classics. So this motivated me to read more classics. I just don't think I really enjoyed this one because I was not a big fan of the plot. I didn't really mind the story. I didn't really care for what was happening in the book. Then I read A Fire and Less by Rebecca Ross. This is the sequel to A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. It's the second book and last book. This was such a great read. I loved the writing style. It was really whimsical. It's fantasy, but not overly complicated politics or anything like that. It's just like a nice little fairy world. So many plot twists in that story, and like so many things that I did not expect. This was like my awakening, and now I want to read all of her books because this one was really whimsical. This one, I think it's really, that's my type of fantasy, you know, when it's whimsical, eerie, mysterious, not when it's like politically complicated. The writing style just like what made the story for me, because I really liked the plot of the story and I was really intrigued, but the writing style made it like 10 times better. I had a great time reading those two books. Then I had probably like the biggest surprise ever with Blood of Hercules by Jasmine. Here you follow the story of Alexis. She's been living a quiet life, but tortured life among mortals. She is supposed to be one of them actually. She doesn't really know that she has anything special until she takes a blood test and it reveals that she's actually a Greek goddess. Now she must go with them and train, like either die or become immortal, but there's no way back to what she was before. And it's kind of like a post-apocalyptic world where titans roam the earth and kill people, and so Greek gods are kind of like defending humans. Like the main character is probably the greatest main character so far that I've read about her. I love her story, I love her arc. She's exhausted, she's terrified, she is smart, and she is really, really funny. It was the kind of funny when genuinely I was like, okay, yeah, I get you, you know. And I think what made the book so great was really the main character, and I just loved her. And even though it's not my kind of book, it's not my cup of tea, I will buy the second book and then the third book when it comes out, because I really want to keep on reading that series now. I really got invested in the main character, in her story, and in what's going to happen next. I think this was really well done, and the main character is my favorite human being ever, and I wish she was my best friend. Then I read Iron Flame and Onyx Storm. I read this in English, read this in French, because I didn't want to buy the third book just yet. What can I say about this? Because I'm not really sure. I really got lost in the lore. I think there are many things that I did not understand and that did not make sense to me. It was weird because I kept on reading even though there were so many things that I wasn't sure I understood. But I kept on reading because it was really addictive and you really don't want to know what's going on. And you can count on Rebecca Yarros to put like a very big cliffhanger at the very, very last line of the book. I understood better the lore in this one. The action, however, was really, really long to settle. There are still things that I do not understand in the book and in the lore, and I think maybe we'll get answers in the other books that are not out yet. So I really hope that I get some answers to my questions, because it was sort of confusing sometimes. It was still a great read and I still loved it. And then last but not least, I read Imagine Me and Believe Me by Tahereh Mafi. These are the last books that I owned in the Shadow Me series, and I will not be reading the other books in the same series. Even though I didn't really care for the plot or main characters, I really love Tahereh Mafi's writing style, and reading her books is always a good time. It's always a pleasure, even when I'm not really a big fan of what's happening in the story. I think that I'm really, really way too old to read this, because in the end, the books basically, I felt like it was what was happening was always the same. Juliet gets kidnapped, people go and rescue her, and in the end they're back to square one. I just didn't really understand the need for so many books in the same series, especially when it's always the same thing happening, like some kind of cycle. Now, it is a good book and I do recommend this dystopia, but I think I'm not the right audience for it. I think I'm too old. Okay, so these are all the books that I read. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I wish you the best end of the year, the best reading, and I'll see you soon for another video. Bye!